Okay, good to have everybody back. We're starting a brand new Torah in Likutey Moharan, which is very exciting, thank God. This is Torah Yud Bet 12. This Torah was given on Shabbat Nachamu. That's the Shabbat right after Tisha B'Av. We know that Tisha B'Av is the greatest day of mourning in the Jewish calendar. This was the day in which the first and the second Beit HaMikdash were both destroyed. This was the day in which the Jewish people, when they were traveling to Eretz Yisrael, they didn't actually believe that we could get in, and they started to cry. And many things, even more recent historical challenges that fell upon the Jewish people as a whole, even so far as close to the Germans, is actually what took place on Tisha B'Av. So Tisha B'Av is a very difficult day. And then the Shabbat, which comes right after Tisha B'Av, is called Shabbat Nachamu. Because even though Hashem gives us challenges in our life, and sometimes they're very, very severe, to the extent that that which we love the most is actually taken from us. So right after that, though, he doesn't let you go so much time without comforting you. So too here, there's Shabbat Nachamu. There is the Shabbat of comfort, which comes right after this day in which of intense mourning. So Rabbi Nachman begins to explain something which actually anybody who is familiar with Chassidut, who's specifically connected to the teachings of Breslov Chassidut, the teachings of Rabbi Nachman, there's a very common phenomenon in which those people who are students of Rabbi Nachman are often ridiculed or they're judged unfavorably. And there's many reasons why this is the case, both reasons which appear to be external and reasons that are more spiritual and internal. So this lesson 12 actually deals very intensely with why it is that people have such a negative outlook on the students of tzaddikim and the teachings of tzaddikim. Because on paper, it doesn't really make any sense. You have a person who dedicated his whole life for the Jewish people, who dedicated his whole life for Hashem, who dedicated his whole life for selfless, altruistic motives. And all that's coming forth from him is the highest level of emet, the highest level of truth. Nothing which contradicts anything which is in the Torah, nothing which contradicts anything which is in Jewish law. So on paper, this person should be revered. And yet we see in the course of history, the biggest tzaddikim and their students, while they were alive, there was a lot of contempt towards them. So we're going to begin to understand a little bit of why that is in this lesson. It starts with a pasuk from Tehillim. It says, Tehillah David Aramimcha Elohai. We say this actually every morning. This is a tehillah, that's a praise or a thanks of David, King David. Aramimcha Elohai. And he's saying to Hashem, I'm going to elevate you, my God. Okay? So then it says, Lashon Rabbeinu Zichronan Livracha. This is the exact language that Rabbi Nachman had dictated this Torah over to Rav Natan Zal. Starts like this. Masha Noraim. What do we see? Sha'al Pia Rov Halomdim Chokim Al Tzadikim. That generally, the majority of people who are very learned, they know a lot of Torah, and yet they oppose tzaddikim. They oppose people who are spiritual masters, who have developed a host of disciples and students, people who learn from them, not just in a superficial way, but in a very intense way. They learn their teachings, they take their advice, they live with that advice, they live with those teachings, their family lives with those teachings, their children, their grandchildren. And he's saying that you see, though, that the majority of people who are very learned in Torah, notice he says they're learned, but nothing else. They're very learned in Torah, they oppose the tzaddikim. V'dovrim al tzaddik atak begava vavus. And he's quoting a pasuk from Tehillim, where King David is speaking about people who are speaking out against him, and they're speaking atak, they're speaking arrogantly, begava, proudly, vavuz, and contemptuously. All against tzaddikim. Zehu mechuven gedol me Hashem yiparach. And here is the chiddush, Rabbi Nachman says, that this is precisely the way that Hashem intends it. So Rabbi Nachman, in this lesson, he's going to be in a very original fashion, trying to explain that there is a spiritual paradigm or phenomenon that's taking place that's much deeper than it looks. That the reason why people who are very learned tend to, on the majority, oppose tzaddikim and their students, even though it seems to be a complete paradox, you would think that those people who are learned in Torah would appreciate these people who have become masters of spirituality the most, and yet they're the ones who are most menagid, they're the ones who are most anti. And now Rabbi Nachman is saying that in truth, Hashem wants it this way, exactly. Okay. Now notice in the beginning, Rabbi Nachman says that the majority of those people that they're lomdim. So a lamdan is someone that he learns a vociferous, if that's a real word, amount of Torah. He knows the length and breadth of all of written and oral Torah and poskim. He's baki, he's expert in tens of thousands of pages of Torah, both the written and the oral tradition, which was given to Moshe Rabbeinu. So obviously it takes a lot of commitment, it takes a lot of effort and toiling, it takes a lot of persistence and perseverance to do so. However, one of the chidushim of the Baal Shem Tov, which is not really such a chidush if you read the Torah, but at the time it had become a big chidush, is that Hashem does not want a person to learn the Torah for the sake of knowing more information. And in the time of the Baal Shem Tov, he saw that there was a culture that became prominent, that became dominant amongst the elite Jewish individuals. And that was to think that I'm going to learn as much Torah as possible because this puts me into the status of the elite few of the Jewish people, and in which I can feel better than those around me. So even though this sounds crazy, this is more common than a secular person might think if they're not familiar with this, or even in the religious world, you might also think it's unusual. But there is actually there's a very big actually contingent of people that they learn for the sake of learning and not for the sake of doing. And this is something that the Baal Shem Tov railed against in very, very extreme terms. And Rabbi Nachman, his great-grandson, continued that cause and maybe even intensified it, because you're going to see what he calls these people that they learn purely for the sake of being able to use their wisdom, their information that they have learned in order to put themselves above another person. He speaks against this in the most extreme of terms. And so we're going to see that in a second. But he's saying that while that's the case, in some ways, this is exactly what Hashem wants. So this is a big paradox, but we're going to have to get into it. Where is this paradigm seen in the Torah? Ki yesh bechinat Yaakov Lavan. We know that Yaakov Avinu was the third of our forefathers, and he was the one who we were named after. So in many ways, the Jewish people, both individually and collectively, most resemble, take after Yaakov Avinu, Jacob. What was the reason? Because Yaakov was the perfect harmony of his two father and grandfather. That his grandfather, Abraham, was called Ish Chesed. He was a man who was kulo, kindness and love. He would open up his tent on all four sides that everybody should be able to come in. There was no Abraham Avinu. There was only everybody else. And this was the first Jew that ever lived, because this is the beginning of the revelation of God in the world. That there could be such a person who has no sense of selfishness at all, and his only desire is to help those around him. Now, even though today we have professions like this, like social work, and maybe psychology, or people in the medical profession, volunteers. So while this might be normative, or you have heard of it nowadays, in the times of Avraham Avinu, there was no such thing as a person who was not looking out for themselves only. And Avraham Avinu was the first to actually mechadish this idea in the world. And this was the beginning of the revelation of Hashem in the world. Pure, unconditional love, not because of what somebody does for you, how they act towards you, what they think about you, what you have in store for you as a result of helping this person, but simply because I love you. This was the chiddush of Avraham Avinu. But this is not the goal. This is not the final step. That's just the beginning. Then you have Yitzchak Avinu. Yitzchak Avinu seems to be an opposite experience. He is not completely for everybody. He spends a lot of time in secluded meditation. Like it said, he was Lasuach Basadeh. He was conversing, speaking to Hashem in the field. And his whole entire life, all you really learn about it is his individual efforts to grow spiritually. You don't really see him connecting with others around him unless he has to. And that's because he represents the opposite experience of Abraham. He is not going out, he's going in. And lastly, we have Yaakov Avinu, Jacob, who he harnesses both positive qualities of his father and grandfather. He has a capacity to give to others through that which he knows. And he also has the capacity to be alone in the tent and to learn and to meditate and to grow spiritually. So he has both. And this is the goal that Hashem wants for us, that we should be Bnei Yaakov, the children of Yaakov, not the children of Yitzchak, not the children of Abraham predominantly. But Yaakov, fascinatingly, despite the fact that he's the Bachur, he's the chosen of the three forefathers, meaning that he's the archetype for every Jew afterwards, what we should emulate, how we should try to live with, and what is really actually in our soul. From even before birth, Yaakov Avinu is struggling. Even in the womb, he's struggling with his twin brother. And once he's born, he's struggling with him out of the womb. And then he has tremendous mishpacha, tremendous family challenges and difficulties. And then ultimately after that, he runs away because he was given something that his brother said that he stole, even though he'd already sold it to him for food, because he didn't care about it, didn't value it. And then Rebecca, Yaakov's mother, said, go to my brothers and he'll shelter you until Esav calms down, who was Yaakov's brother. So when he went to Lavan's house, what he didn't know is that Lavan was actually not like his mother Rivka. He was also very disturbed, like his brother Esav. And in fact, Lavan himself represents, what we're going to find out in a second, the person that opposes the tzaddik, who actually happens to be very learned in Torah. And the whole reason that we're learning about Lavan and Yaakov is to show that there's always this paradigm of a person really trying to do things for the right reason, meaning I'm learning in order that I should get closer to Hashem. I'm learning in order that I should be a better person. I'm learning in order to help all those around me to be able to do the same thing. You're always going to have people that are in the Bechina, the concept of Lavan, that they're learning not for the right reasons. And then instead of the Torah being a spice of life for them, like the Gemara says in Yoma, the Torah actually becomes a spice of death. That they end up being harmed by the Torah that they learn because they're using it not for the right reasons. It's almost like sunlight, right? If you have sunlight in a constricted form, it gives you energy, it gives you strength, it gives you a tan, it gives you joy, it gives you vitamin D, I think. But if you look at it directly, without any type of constriction, without any type of boundaries, you're not looking at it for a certain reason, you're just looking at it so it can burn you. Okay, so the Torah is the same way. Now he says, Ki yesh bechina Yaakov v'Lavan. There's always this concept of Yaakov and Lavan. Yaakov, who at tzaddik, kamechadish chedushin deraita. That is that Yaakov, he represents the tzaddik of the generation. That he is mechadishing, he is making novel insights into the Torah, velomed Torah Lishma. And all of his studying is what's called Lishma. There is a basic premise amongst Chazal that a person can either do a mitzvah, lo Lishma or Lishma, which simply means a person can either do what Hashem wants for the wrong reasons or he can do it for the right reasons. I'm either doing it for myself because there's some benefit for me, or I'm doing it in a selfless way, like Avram Avinu did everything, okay? Now, obviously, the better way is Lishma. I'm doing it for the right reasons. However, what's often the case is before a person can get to the point of Lishma, they start lo Lishma. They start doing mitzvot not for the right reasons, meaning, or not completely right reasons. I'm doing it for some type of selfish motive, because that's how we grew up thinking. Everything was about us. Everything is about me. Everything is about self-propagation and honor and kavod and esteem and ego and money and all these related factors that are so common in 2022. And therefore, when that person begins to start learning Torah, He doesn't know anything besides that. So why is he learning Torah? Maybe because he sees that a person who learns Torah in the Jewish community, he's revered, he's honored, people listen to him, right? So maybe he's learning for that reason. Or maybe he sees even more than that. I can actually show other people I know more than them, right? So the Torah has a way of, just like wine almost, which is very connected actually, that a person who he's centered, a person who he has inner peace, a person who he has worked on himself, when he drinks wine, so he becomes a better version of himself, happier and lighter, and his mind becomes expanded, like Chazal explained. But when a person is unrefined, a person has not worked on himself, a person, his midot, his inner qualities have not yet been rectified. So then when he drinks, it actually brings the worst out of him. The same exact alcohol that made this other person to expand and be more glowing and be more joyful and be able to think more clearly or at a higher level, this other person, his mind becomes constricted. And all of these negative aspects of him come out, his anger and his jealousy, his emotional turbidity, right? All of these things begin to unfold. So the same thing by the Torah, that the Torah is compared to wine. The Torah, for a person who he's learning it for the right reasons, it could bring the best out of him. But the opposite is also true. And this is the concept of either Yaakov and Lavan. Yaakov, he's learning for the right reasons, right? He's not learning for himself. He's learning that he should get closer to Hashem and to help others do the same. And therefore, as a result of that, those insights that he's coming to are selfless insights. And when a person has insights that are coming from a place of selflessness, then they're really drawing down the light of godliness into the world. However, the good which is stored for that type of person, that he's doing it for the right reasons, he's learning for the right reasons, he's trying to give over Torah for the right reasons, he's really trying to help other people in a completely selfless way. This is the good which is coming to this person is only for the future. It's hidden away for the future. Like it says in Masechet Eruvin Chaf Bet, Lamacha lekabas hacharam. It says in a pasuk in Devarim, safeguard the mitzvot today to fulfill them. So our sages explain in Masechet Eruvin, today, meaning in this world, olam hazeh, do the mitzvot, not tomorrow to fulfill them. Why? Because today you do the mitzvot, meaning in your lifetime you do the mitzvot. Tomorrow, meaning in olam haba, the world that's to come, your experience which is subsequent to your physical life here, that's the place of receiving the good for everything that you do. And this actually, while it's a very basic idea in the Torah, it's something worth reminding ourselves of, because there's many people, myself included, that are trying very hard to try to help other Jewish people to return to their roots and to connect to their higher self and to elevate themselves and to find those things they've always been looking for. And as well, to try to grow ourselves spiritually and to connect ourselves to real tzaddikim, to learn their teachings, to bring them into our life. And yet it seems like those types of people are getting it the worst. They're going through the most struggles and the most difficulties and the most challenges, and it really doesn't seem to make any sense. And therefore, it's important to understand that Shabbat cannot be experienced during the 6 days of the week. During the 60 days of the week, you can prepare for Shabbat. And the person who prepares for Shabbat the most, his Shabbat is the most geschmack. His Shabbat is the most fun. His Shabbat is the most elevated, right? But that comes from the preparation during the 6 days. But the actual experience of Shabbat is only on Shabbat itself. Shabbat is me'ein olam haba. It's a taste of olam haba. The 6 days is corresponding to the 6,000 years of creation in this world, meaning all of olam hazeh. So whatever you do here, this is preparing what comes after. This is a pretty basic, fundamental concept within the Torah and Judaism. And this is the reason why all of the good that comes from what you're doing, you don't feel right now, because that good can't be felt right now because it's the 6 days of the week. And it's impossible to feel Shabbat fully on the 6 days of the week. And therefore, it's because that his reward, meaning his schar, the positive consequences of all of his positive actions, his positive thoughts, his positive emotions, his positive intentions. It's for this reason that Yaakov's name is Yaakov, Rabbi Nachman says. Lashon Ekev, the Sof. Because the name Yaakov comes from the word Akev. Ekev means the heel. And the heel is always referring to Vasof, the end. Scharo levasof. So Rabbi Nachman says it's alluding to the fact that even though Yaakov, his whole entire efforts are in this world, and that's why he's struggling from birth until he passes away, still too, it's only because Ekev, the schar for everything that he does, is only in the future. And this, Rabbi Nachman says, is the whole reason why Yaakov is actually struggling his whole life. Because it's the struggle which is creating the platform, it's creating the structure, it's creating the different particulars of his life that allow him to achieve the good which is coming only after this present experience. And for this reason, we're called Yaakov. So in some sense, when Esav was born, and we know that there's a story in the Torah about the birth of these twins, that first Esav is born, he's fully developed. He's even born with a lot of hair, like some babies are. And then you see that there's this little baby who comes at the end, holding on to the heel. And that's why he's called Yaakov. So we know that the Torah is not just a history book. It's a spiritual guide. It's speaking about psycho-spiritual paradigms that are constantly taking place. So what is this referring to in a very deep way? It's referring to the fact that Esav, meaning a person who's not trying to get better, he's not trying to elevate, he's not trying to grow, he's not trying to help those around him. He is born first, meaning he gets to experience so-called good first, but it's limited. And ultimately, at the end of the day, when he thinks that he did it, he accomplished, he achieved, all of a sudden you see that there is this boy hanging off of his leg on his heel. This boy called Yaakov, that he's not hairy, he's not developed, he's undeveloped, he's actually glot, he's smooth. And this boy Yaakov, the reason he comes at the end is because his schar comes at the end. His reward comes at the end. Bezrat Hashem, next time that we do this Likutey Moharan, we're going to continue to find out what is Lavan. If Yaakov represents the person who's doing everything Lishma for the right reasons, and struggling as a result of the Bechina of Lavan, we have to understand more. What is it about Lavan that's causing Yaakov so many trials and tribulations? Does anybody have any questions about what we've done so far? Questions, statements, comments. Such a comforting perspective. Thank you. Yeah, it's really amazing. I even, like, as I was reading it just now, I got like a Ruach Chaim that Rabbi Nachman often gives us, new life. You know, we hear it so many times in the Torah. It literally is throughout all of Shas, all the time. In this world, people who are really good people, they struggle the most. People who are not, often their lives appear to be easier, even though it's really not. But then after this short life is over, like anybody who knows that me, you know, Bezrat Hashem, soon to be 33, or my father who's watching this class, that he's in his early to mid 60s. So I'm sure he would tell you that it just flew by, right? So Bezrat Hashem, everybody lives to 120. But the truth is that this life is very short, and what's coming after this is very long. It's so long that it never ends, and so therefore, in the whole scheme of things, you know, even though it feels so long and sometimes so unbearable at times, this life, the bitterness that comes with this life, the struggles that come with this life. At the same time, if a person can keep their eye on the fact, like Rabbi Nachman says, that you have to all the time to keep your eyes on the purpose of your life, which is that which actually comes after. This is the means to the end. This is not the end in and of itself. And when a person has the end in mind while he's going through the means, then he can actually experience the end even before he gets there. So this is the Chiddush of Chassidus. That even though it's true that Chazal, the sages thousands of years ago, said, well, don't worry, because at the end, it's all going to be worth it. So the Baal Shem Tov saw, and Rabbi Nachman saw, well, we're not going to get there because it's too hard. So let's taste it now. And how do you taste it now? That your mind, your consciousness is so much bound up in the Vekas with Olam Haba, with that good which is coming. So if you connect yourself enough to that vision in your heart and your mind and your soul, you can live with it right now. And then you don't feel it like that. You don't feel that same, because then the means is not divorced from the purpose. The journey is not divorced from the destination. And this, Rabbi Nachman teaches, is a source of pain. When the journey becomes divorced from the destination. And this is why people who are secular, there's no comfort for the struggles that we go through in this world. Because then it's just, I'm unlucky, like, why me? And the end is it feels so like, what was that, But if only, they knew that this is really just a means to a much larger end. This is really only a journey to a much more beautiful destination. Then not only would they be able to bear the weight of the world, but you can actually be truly happy here, Rabbi Nachman says, while you're here, despite the difficulties. Yeah, so someone said, how does this coincide with Rabbi Nachman's other Torah that you can feel Olam Haba and Olam Hazeh? So that's this, that through the teachings of Chassidus, through the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov, the teachings of Rabbi Nachman, through the Chassidic masters, they're able to allow you to taste Olam Haba right now, even while you're here. And the way I heard it recently, I think from Rav Gedalia Fleer, he's a big mashpia in Breslov. He really built Breslov in the past 100 years with a certain other few very influential figures. So he compared it to, like, before you get to the bar, you take a shot first, like pregame. Because to even get there, you got to relax a little bit first. So too here, the teachings of Chassidus, and specifically the teachings of Rabbi Nachman, they're like the shot on the way to the bar, and that way you're able to get there b'simcha. That was not me advocating alcohol use or drug use. It's just a mashal. So okay, any other questions before we sign off? No? Okay. Everybody have an amazing day. Bezrat Hashem. Next lesson we're going to do is Likutey Halachot, Bezrat Hashem. If you're in Israel, Saturday night we're having a class in Yerushalayim, Baruch Hashem. Should be really good. A little preparation for Tisha B'Av based on Chassidus and Kabbalah. And then Sunday, Bezrat Hashem, actually doing a siyum on a Masechet. I'm hoping to be able to shoot it live, because I'm going to give over Divrei Chizuk. I'm going to go over words of encouragement, Bezrat Hashem. And if not, you'll be able to hopefully watch it afterwards. Everybody watch out for the newsletters that we're writing every week. Me and Aaron London, we're putting our heart and soul into this. This is for sure the hardest part of the organization. And in some ways, it's actually the sweetest part. So if anybody's not looking at those newsletters, you really should. There's a lot of hours and sweat and blood that are being poured into them. And give it to your friends and give it to your family. We already have gotten from, being in one shul and having like 30 people read it. We're now like closer to 200 people. So if you connect to these teachings and you feel other people would benefit from these teachings, so, print them out and give it to the people in your shul. If you're in one shul, two shuls, three shuls, give it out to everybody. This is going to bring the Mashiach mamish. This is what the Mashiach told the Baal Shem Tov. When your teachings go out, that's it. And nobody gives over the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov like Rabbi Nachman ben Fega. So Bezrat Hashem, we should all have the schut to be able to get these teachings out in every possible format, to help people to taste the sweetness of what's to come before we get there. Everybody have a great night.